There's a silent trap INFJs fall into, not because they're indecisive or unaware, but because their mind refuses to choose a path until it has explored every hidden possibility. It feels responsible. It feels intelligent. It feels like wisdom. But years later, this same habit becomes the source of their deepest regret. Because while the INFJ is analyzing the consequences, protecting everyone involved, and trying to avoid harm, life keeps moving, and the decision makes itself without them. The real question isn't why INFJs hesitate. It's what happens inside that hesitation. Their intuition scans the future. Their empathy scans the emotional impact. Their mind plays every scenario forward and backward like a movie only they can see. And by the time they finally move, the world around them has changed. Opportunities fade. People shift. Moments expire. What once felt safe becomes the very thing that holds them back. If you've ever felt the weight of decisions you didn't make, or the pain of choosing too late, stay with this video until the end. This isn't about blame. It's about understanding the pattern that shapes your life more than you realize, and how to break it before it becomes permanent. Before we continue, drop the word aware in the comments if you've ever replayed a decision you didn't make soon enough. And here's your question. Do you overthink because you fear the wrong outcome, or because you fear hurting someone? If you're new here, don't forget to subscribe. This channel is built for the way your mind works. They overanalyze potential outcomes so deeply that opportunities expire before they act. This is the quiet, invisible trap that takes hold long before an INFJ realizes what is happening. Their mind begins running simulations, future scenarios, emotional consequences, ripple effects that stretch further than anyone else would ever consider. What if they choose wrong? What if the decision hurts someone unintentionally? What if the opportunity is not what it appears to be? What if the cost is higher than the reward? While others move quickly, trusting impulse or logic, the INFJ steps into a vast internal landscape where every possible path must be understood before a single step is taken. They are not stalling out of laziness or fear of effort. They are trying to prevent regret, disappointment, or unintended harm. Their mind becomes a theater of possibilities, and every scene must be watched, analyzed, and emotionally processed before they decide. But the world does not wait for internal clarity. Doors close while they are still examining the hinges. People move on while the INFJ is quietly analyzing emotional dynamics. Opportunities fade while they are still testing for authenticity. And this delay is not the result of indecision. It is a form of self-protection. They want certainty in a world that offers none. They want alignment, purpose, and emotional accuracy before committing. They want to choose with integrity rather than desperation. Yet the very depth that makes their choices powerful also slows them down in moments where speed determines the outcome. They feel time differently than others. They want to understand the soul of a decision, not just its appearance. What makes this trap even more painful is that INFJs often sense the opportunity slipping, yet they still hesitate. Not because they do not want it, but because they want to be absolutely sure they can handle it, nurture it, and grow with it. They imagine the long-term consequences, the hidden emotional demands, the unseen challenges waiting behind the choice. They feel the weight of the future pressing against the present, urging them to pause, consider, and evaluate. And by the time they reach clarity, the moment has already passed. Only later, sometimes much later, do they realize that their depth cost them something that bravery alone could have given. Their regret is never about choosing wrong. It is about never choosing at all. They prioritize avoiding harm over pursuing what they truly want, delaying life-changing decisions. This is the paradox that shapes so many INFJ life paths. The heart knows what it desires, but the conscience steps in like a guardian, demanding caution before movement. For the INFJ, wanting something is never just wanting it. Every desire carries moral weight. Every step forward feels like it could ripple outward and touch someone else's world. And so, instead of asking, "What do I want?" they instinctively ask, "Who might this affect?" Or, "Could this hurt someone unintentionally?" Their dreams become secondary to the responsibility they feel for the emotional balance of everyone around them. Even decisions that belong solely to them must pass through ethical filters, filters so complex that a simple choice becomes a labyrinth. They sense potential outcomes with an almost psychic precision. If choosing a new path might disappoint a loved one, they hesitate. If pursuing a goal might disrupt stability, they pause. If saying yes to an opportunity might shift dynamics in a relationship, they rethink it. Their internal world becomes a negotiation table where they sit across from every possible consequence, trying to protect everyone, often at the cost of protecting themselves. The depth of their empathy becomes a weight they carry into every crossroads. What others might call overthinking, INFJs call responsibility. They want their steps to be clean, intentional, and gentle, even when life demands boldness, messiness, and risk. But the tragedy is that life-changing decisions rarely wait for perfect alignment. While the INFJ is busy ensuring no one gets hurt, the door quietly closes. Their heart feels the pressure of longing, yet their mind insists on caution, creating a split that delays movement until the moment is gone. They assume there will be another chance, more time, a safer opening, but opportunities are not built for emotional perfection. They appear, they challenge, they demand courage, and they vanish. And the INFJ is left wondering how many dreams they postponed, not because they lacked desire, but because they were trying to protect people who may never know the sacrifice made on their behalf. Only later, in the quiet moments of reflection, do they recognize the pattern. Their compassion shaped their path, but so did their fear of causing harm. And the hardest truth is this: sometimes the gentlest souls lose the most because they were too busy protecting the world to step fully into their own life. They absorb everyone else's emotions, making choices feel heavier than they actually are. This is the part of the INFJ experience most people will never see. When they face a decision, they are not deciding for one person, they are deciding for an entire emotional ecosystem. While others evaluate options based on logic, preference, or opportunity, the INFJ evaluates based on impact, harmony, and emotional weight. The moment a choice presents itself, they involuntarily begin absorbing the unspoken reactions of everyone involved. What would this person feel? How might that person interpret it? Will someone be hurt? Will someone misread their intentions? Every emotional possibility becomes a thread pulling at them from a different direction. And before they even realize it, the decision feels 10 times heavier than it objectively is. They do not do this out of weakness. They do it out of sensitivity. Their empathy is not something they turn on when needed. It is a constant current flowing through them. When they imagine choosing a path, they do not imagine the action itself. They imagine the emotional consequences. The disappointed expression on someone's face. The tension in the air that others might ignore. The subtle shift in a relationship dynamic. They feel these outcomes before they happen, as though the future has already landed on their shoulders. And so a decision that should be simple becomes emotionally charged, weighted, and complicated in ways most people could never understand. Internally, it feels like carrying other people's voices in their own mind. Not literally, but emotionally, an echo of everyone else's needs, fears, hopes, and expectations. The INFJ then tries to make a decision that protects all of those emotional realities at once. Of course, the choice becomes heavy. They are lifting more than just their own feelings. They are lifting the entire room. And in moments where they desperately want clarity, their empathy floods them with too much information, making the path forward blur instead of sharpen. What they rarely realize is that this emotional absorption creates an illusion, the illusion that every choice is monumental, that every action has life-altering consequences, that every shift might hurt someone irreparably. And because they care deeply, they hesitate, overthink, and delay decisions that would bring them freedom, growth, or happiness. The weight they feel is real, but it is not theirs alone. They are carrying the emotional burdens of others while trying to build a life of their own. And the moment they learn to separate compassion from responsibility, the world becomes lighter, and their decisions finally become theirs again. They wait for perfect clarity, not realizing clarity only comes after taking action. This is the quiet trap INFJs fall into without noticing. The belief that if they think long enough, deeply enough, or intuitively enough, the perfect answer will reveal itself. They sit with a decision the way someone studies a map before a journey, believing that if they stare long enough, the entire road, every twist, every risk, every possible emotion will become visible. They want certainty, not because they're indecisive, but because they feel the emotional consequences of every possible choice before they make it. And so they wait. They analyze. They revisit old lessons, old wounds, old mistakes. They imagine the future from a dozen angles. They look for a sign, a feeling, a moment that tells them, yes, this is the right step. But that moment rarely comes. In their mind, clarity is something that should arrive fully formed, a calm, undeniable knowing that makes action effortless. But real clarity does not work this way. While the INFJ is waiting for the fog to clear, life keeps moving. Opportunities evolve. Paths shift. The world continues unfolding, and their intuition, which is powerful but not meant to work in isolation, becomes overwhelmed with too many possibilities and not enough real-world feedback. The INFJ thinks they are being wise by waiting, but often they are simply delaying the very clarity they're searching for. Because understanding doesn't grow in stillness, it grows in motion. Deep inside, they sense this truth. They have moments where their intuition whispers to act, to take the first step, even if they cannot see the entire staircase. But fear interrupts. Fear of hurting someone, fear of choosing wrong, fear of losing stability, fear of repeating the past. And so the INFJ retreats back into thought, believing more reflection will create more confidence. Instead, it creates more doubt. Reflection becomes rumination. Intuition becomes hesitation. Growth becomes paralysis. What they cannot see from the inside is that intuition needs experience to sharpen. It needs movement, interaction, feedback, and momentum. The moment an INFJ takes action, even a small one, the fog lifts. Patterns become clearer. Emotions sort themselves out. The world responds, giving them information they could never have predicted in silence. The decision that once felt impossible suddenly becomes obvious. The path that once felt heavy becomes lighter. The INFJ's greatest lesson is this: clarity is not something you wait for. It is something you create by stepping forward. The truth reveals itself only when you move. They fear irreversible mistakes more than they value long-term growth. This silent fear shapes more INFJ decisions than they ever admit. The fear that one wrong step could alter their life in a way they cannot undo. While other people take risks casually, an INFJ feels the emotional weight of every potential outcome in advance. They imagine the fallout, the disappointment, the ripple effect their choice might create in themselves and others. And because their mind connects long chains of consequences instantly, even small decisions can feel like stepping into a vast unknown. This fear doesn't come from weakness or insecurity. It comes from living a life where emotional accuracy matters, where they've learned that some wounds leave marks that don't fade easily. And so they hesitate, not because they lack ambition, but because they deeply understand the cost of choosing wrong. In this internal landscape, mistakes don't feel like events, they feel like turning points. The INFJ remembers every time they ignored their intuition, every moment someone betrayed their trust, every situation where giving someone a chance led to disappointment. Their memory is emotional, not factual, so mistakes stay alive in them far longer than in others. They avoid repeating pain with the same intensity others avoid physical danger. When a decision presents itself, the INFJ subconsciously asks, "What if this becomes another scar?" That quiet question is enough to freeze their momentum. They think, they plan, they wait for certainty. But certainty never comes. The fear of an irreversible misstep becomes a self-imposed limitation. What they rarely see is how this protective instinct slows their evolution. Life is built through movement, not perfect steps, but informed ones. Growth requires accepting that uncertainty is unavoidable, that some mistakes are not only survivable, but necessary. Yet INFJs hold themselves to a higher emotional standard, believing they must find the right choice every time. They forget that long-term growth often emerges from imperfect beginnings. The fear that once protected them becomes the very force holding them back from becoming who they are meant to be. But the moment they begin to trust their resilience instead of fearing their fragility, everything changes. They realize a single decision cannot break them. They realize mistakes do not define them. Stagnation does. They understand that progress is not a straight line, but a series of recalibrations. The INFJ begins to see that the real, irreversible mistake is never allowing themselves to grow, evolve, or risk becoming more. They replay past decisions in their mind, creating hesitation in future ones. An INFJ's mind is a quiet archive. Every choice, every turning point, every emotional consequence stored with detail and meaning. When they revisit the past, it's not nostalgia, it's analysis. They walk back through decisions like investigators returning to a crime scene, examining what they missed, what they overlooked, what they could have done differently. This reflective instinct is powerful, but it carries a cost. The more they replay the past, the more uncertain they become about the future. Instead of freeing themselves from old mistakes, they re-immerse themselves in them, allowing yesterday's weight to shape tomorrow's hesitation. This mental rerun isn't obsessive, it's protective. The INFJ wants to make sure they never repeat a painful pattern. Their intuition records the emotional texture of every experience, the disappointment, the guilt, the misread intentions, the slow realizations that came too late. When they face a new decision, those memories rise like quiet warnings. Remember what happened last time. Be careful. Think again. Every option is filtered through the emotional database of their past, making even simple choices feel as if they carry the potential for regret. To the INFJ, hesitation looks like wisdom. But in practice, it often becomes a pause that stretches too long. What makes this cycle more complex is that INFJs don't just remember what happened, they remember what could have happened. Every almost, every what if, every alternate path still lives in their imagination. They see parallel versions of their lives, each shaped by different decisions. This ability makes them insightful, but it also intensifies their fear of choosing wrong again. The mind that can envision so many possible futures becomes overwhelmed trying to pick just one. The replaying of old decisions creates an illusion that more thinking will protect them, when in truth, it only delays action. Yet something powerful happens when the INFJ realizes this truth. Reflection is useful, but fixation is not. They begin to understand that wisdom doesn't come from reliving the past, but from moving forward with what the past has taught them. The moment an INFJ stops replaying and starts integrating, hesitation dissolves into clarity. They discover they are not defined by the decisions they made, but by the courage to make new ones without letting old memories hold them hostage. They choose stability over desire, then regret the quiet sacrifices they made. An INFJ's life often begins with choices rooted in safety rather than longing. Not because they lack ambition, but because they grew up understanding the cost of instability. Emotional unpredictability shaped them early, teaching them that security, even uninspiring security, feels less dangerous than chasing something uncertain. So when adulthood presents crossroads, they tend to pick the steady path, the reliable job instead of the passionate dream, the predictable relationship instead of the electric one, the environment they can manage instead of the one that challenges them. In the moment, it feels responsible. In reality, it often becomes the seed of future regret. The sacrifice happens quietly, almost invisibly. They tell themselves they can live without the dream, that they can adapt to the job that doesn't fulfill them, that peace is better than excitement. INFJs are masters at coping. They can transform discomfort into purpose and convince themselves they're satisfied even when something essential is missing. But desire doesn't vanish just because it's ignored. It lingers beneath the surface, tapping against their conscience in the middle of the night, whispering reminders of what could have been. That whisper grows louder as the years pass, turning into a subtle ache that no amount of stability can soothe. This regret isn't dramatic. It's slow, introspective, and deeply internal. The INFJ begins to notice the small symptoms first: envy toward people who chose boldly, nostalgia for dreams they abandoned, emotional fatigue from suppressing their true wants. Their intuition, the part of them that always knew what they were meant to pursue, begins to push back. It asks difficult questions. Why didn't you choose yourself? Why did you settle? What are you protecting now? That inner conflict creates tension between the life they built and the life they imagined, revealing the emptiness hidden beneath their practical decisions. And yet, this moment of regret is also the beginning of their awakening. INFJs do not stay asleep forever. When the discomfort becomes undeniable, they begin reclaiming the desires they sacrificed. Slowly, quietly, courageously, they start saying yes to what once scared them. The realization that they settled becomes the fuel that propels them forward. They understand that stability without fulfillment is a cage, and desire without action is grief. When they finally choose the path that aligns with their true self, they transform, not because the world changes, but because they finally allow themselves to. They realize too late that protecting others often costs them the life they wanted. For many INFJs, life becomes a long series of choices shaped by responsibility rather than desire. From childhood onward, they learn to read the needs of the people around them, family, friends, partners, and they begin adjusting their dreams, their behavior, even their identity to reduce conflict and keep others stable. It feels natural at first, almost instinctive. They step into the role of emotional anchor, peacekeeper, invisible supporter. And because they do it so well, no one notices how much of themselves they are giving away. They certainly do not notice it either, not until years later, when the weight of self-abandonment becomes too heavy to ignore. In their 20s, they tell themselves they have time. They reassure themselves that choosing someone else's comfort over their own dreams is temporary, noble, or simply what good people do. They postpone the life they want, the bold choices, the risky paths, the passions that call to them, believing they will return to them one day. But time moves quietly, and every compromise they make becomes another thread tying them to a life that does not belong to them. They look around one morning and realize the dreams they once carried so vividly have faded, not because they forgot them, but because they kept choosing others first. The heartbreak of this realization is profound. INFJs rarely resent the people they sacrificed for. They resent themselves for allowing it to happen. They replay conversations where they stayed silent to avoid tension. They remember the opportunities they turned down because someone else needed them. They recall moments where they knew what they wanted but chose the safer, softer, more convenient path for the sake of harmony. Slowly, they understand that the life they are living is not the one they would have chosen if they had listened to their own inner voice instead of everyone else's needs.
But this awareness, painful as it is, marks the turning point.
INFJs do not stay lost once they finally see the truth. When they recognize how much of themselves they sacrificed, they begin reclaiming their desires with a seriousness they never had before. They start choosing with intention, not out of guilt, not out of duty, not out of fear of disrupting others. They make space for the passions they buried, the ambitions they postponed, the identity they muted. And in doing so, they learn the lesson that transforms the rest of their life. Protecting others was never supposed to cost them their own future. Once they realize this, they stop living for everyone else and start living for themselves.
Some INFJs learn this truth early. Others discover it only after years of quiet sacrifice. But once the realization hits, once they see how much of their life was shaped by protecting everyone but themselves, something irreversible awakens. They stop giving away the parts of themselves that were never meant to be negotiated. They stop apologizing for their dreams. They stop shrinking to keep others comfortable. And when they finally reclaim the life that should have been theirs all along, the world notices because their energy shifts from quiet survival to intentional becoming. If you're still reading, it means this message reached the part of you that knows you've sacrificed too much already. Tell me in the comments, which part of yourself are you ready to reclaim?
Write the word enough so I know you watched to the end.
And if you want more deep INFJ content like this, make sure you subscribe to Brainy One, because the next video might be the one that finally puts everything into perspective for you.